I respect a player's career and how short it is. Key words from Eddie Howe there about Alexander Isak. Should Newcastle United fans be worried in any way that this has reared its head again, given Liverpool have kind of pivoted from Alexander Isak to Hugo Ekitike? Could it go back the other way?
I don't think so. I think Liverpool are so far down the track with Hugo Ekitike and Frankfurt that it won't happen. However, the noise, I hate to say, for Newcastle fans won't go away. You get the feeling that we'll be talking about Alexander Isak right the way through to the deadline day on September the 1st. The positive as far as Newcastle fans are concerned is that Liverpool spending the best part of €100 million on Hugo Ekitike means that they don't have €100 million to spend on someone like Alexander Isak. And as we know, where the Premier League sides are conscious of PSR, we know that teams in La Liga have to be very careful about what they spend as well, particularly Barcelona, so it leaves only Real Madrid. There are very few sides in European football that could afford the type of money that Newcastle want. Now, their stance is quite clear, and Eddie Howe said this after the game yesterday. He's not for sale. We don't want to sell him, and that will be their message to any potential suitor between now and September the 1st. But this is a player that got 32 goal involvements last season in all competitions. He was absolutely sensational. He was one of the best strikers in world football last season. So there is always going to be noise. There is always going to be interest. Now, Newcastle do hold the cards because he has 3 years left on his current Newcastle contract. So therefore, it's not like it's 1 or 2 years left where they have to start thinking about the financial side of any transfer dealing. They still very much hold the cards there. And Eddie Howe has made it quite clear to Alexander Isak, I want you here. I want you to lead my attack. I want you to be a part of this Champions League squad and be a part of this team that I believe can not only better what we did last season by winning the League Cup, winning more silverware, but I believe we can have a huge impact in the Champions League, and you're a key part of it. So any noise, put it to one side if possible. Let's focus on Newcastle.
It does sound like, and I know Newcastle United fans won't want to hear this, but from what Eddie Howe was saying, that maybe Isak's head had been turned by this interest from Liverpool. Now, you mentioned that Newcastle United hold the cards, 3 years left on his contract. If they keep him, which we expect him to, as it stands, come next summer, if they haven't tied him down to another contract and maybe a reasonable release clause so all parties are happy, he'll then have 2 years left on his contract. And Newcastle United might then find themselves in a position where they've got a player in Alexander Isak, who's only got 2 years left on his contract, and one of their number one targets in Hugo Ekitike is now plying his trade at Liverpool. Are they going to find themselves in a position where not only would they have to bring in someone to replace Isak, but another striker as well? Would they have to be in the market for two players in that position?
Very possibly so. We know that they're in the market for a striker this summer, and Eddie Howe's plan was not just to buy Hugo Ekitike as a replacement for Alexander Isak. He had a plan to play them both together, but he also had a succession plan should Newcastle decide to sell Alexander Isak in this window or next summer. So I think that's quite important to point out. I think the situation moving forward is very much, they've lost Callum Wilson. They have Will Asula, who's a younger striker and an exciting prospect and product maybe for the future and a project for the future. So they do need someone who can fill the void if Alexander Isak were to be injured or to not be available, or as they've done in this pre-season, Eddie Howe wanted to share the load amongst the strike force. João Pedro was a player that they were very much interested in, who could play as that false nine, who could play through the middle as well. They weren't able to get that deal over the line. So therefore, they're back at the drawing board looking at their options and targets, because it's absolutely a position they do need to strengthen. The problem for Newcastle is everyone knows that they had £70 million rejected by Eintracht Frankfurt, so they know exactly how much is on the chequebook.
Yeah. Very much so. Now, it should be said that Eddie Howe did say that he is still confident of bringing in some players in this window, despite missing out on some of their big targets to other clubs. Right, don't go away, because coming up, we're joined by Florian Plettenberg as he brings us all the transfer news from Germany.